Hi, I am Tony Russo, and this is Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, a bonus episode. This week, we are speaking with one of the new members of our advisory board. But before we get into that, I would like to invite you to take a look in the show notes and click on the link to the events page at Kates-Boylston.com, where you can find out more information about our Funeral Service Business Plan Conference in Pittsburgh, April 1st and 2nd, 2025. Last year's Funeral Service Business Plan was really interesting and set the tone for the things that we hope to do. So this one should be even better. So take a look at that link in the show notes. Our guest today is Tanya Scotece. She is one of the new members of our advisory board. She is a mortuary school instructor, but there's so much more to it than that. So I'm going to let her introduce herself. And let's get into it. Here's Tanya. So welcome back. You are the first person that I'm interviewing for the advisory board who has already been on the podcast. There are, I think, are 2 or 3 others, but you were the first guest, and I'm still among the most popular of our shows. So for the people who don't remember, or for the people who haven't listened back that far, can you just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and what you hope to get from the advisory board?
Yes, of course, Tony. Thank you very much for having me on the show today. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Tanya Scotece. I am currently the program coordinator at Miami Dade College for the funeral service program. I've been at the college since 2018 and was appointed to the coordinator position in January of 2023.
One of the things that has made you very popular around Kates-Boylston anyway is you were among the first people when we started to really kind of concentrate on all the changes that were going on in mortuary school education and the different paths that students were finding. That was, I guess, almost 3 years ago. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the brief state of the industry from the school, the education side?
Sure. So I had come from industry. I had been with Farley Funeral Homes and Crematory, which was on the west coast of Florida for just under 13 years, and had worked my way up into senior management, overseeing 2 funeral homes and a cemetery. So all HR, all administration. Having transitioned into the academic world, as I mentioned, in 2018, and then having assumed the role or appointed the role of coordinator, we've seen many changes and trends within the death care profession or funeral world or whatever people are
right.
utilizing. I know it sets people off. They get
it's so funny. Every time I type something, I'm like, I'm going to hear it from someone.
I know. It kind of brings me back to working in the funeral home. I'll never forget, I had a family that I wrote the obituary. We kind of prefaced it. And I had one family, it was like at 1 p.m. and I had another one at 4. And the 1 o'clock one, I wrote the obituary and I wrote passed away. And they looked at me and they're like, why do you have to be so fluffy? Can't you just say that the person died? So the one at 4, I did the same thing, wrote the obituary, wrote so-and-so died. And they said, how could you be so harsh?
Yeah.
So I've come to learn, you know what, you can't please everybody. So in any case, whatever word people want to use in our funeral profession, we have, obviously it's a small niche of people going into the field. And there's many factors about that. I still hold firm to 1/3 of my students are coming in as helpers or helping professions. They're usually leaving nursing, medical, academia, like EMS kinds of fields, looking to just further into something a little bit more. They'll use the word meaningful. Now, somebody can say, well, those other fields sound very meaningful also.
Right.
Nonetheless, that's what the students say. We also have 1/3 of our students at Miami Dade College coming in that are taking over a family business. Maybe it's their parents, grandparents, extended family, and they're looking to get licensed in order to take over the business role. And then my third set of students are what I call my goth or my, very, I'm going to use like macabre, kind of like, the tats and the piercings. And that's actually what my dissertation was specifically on. So I'm very, very familiar with that specific population. So to sum it up, we have 3, specific types of populations at the college. And then in 2020, obviously the pandemic hit the world. And we had some, changes with the program. We had some just being able to pivot to online during that time frame, and also bringing foremost and forward the mental health aspect. So when I was appointed coordinator in January of 2023, we started looking at the initiative of the holistic student, right? Not just the academic side of the student, but how are we setting up students for success? Because the National Funeral Director Association had done a survey back several years ago that it was an alarming statistic. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it stated that 50% of mortuary graduates will be out of the field in funeral when they are 5 years from graduation.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah. So that's an alarming statistic. So, I mean, we want people to be successful in their respective field, but we don't want to sugarcoat anything. So since that time, with the holistic approach to our students going in, we've brought in a lot of guest speakers, a lot of industry partners. We've really amplified our advisory committee. We have really like all different types of folks on it that are collaborating pretty much weekly and or biweekly about helping our students be successful.
There's so much there. I'm not going to turn this into a podcast, though. This is just an introduction. What do you think we can do as a publication? What are we doing well, do you think, and what can we improve upon as a publication to kind of support that? Because I agree with everything you said. I'm very excited about the work that you're doing. And I've spoken with some other educators who are like, this is what's going on in education. I mean, it's at Miami Dade and it's at other places that are trying to be more forward thinking. What do you think we can do at Kates-Boylston to kind of support that messaging?
Right. So having stood on both sides of the bridge, as I like to call it, right? Because when I was in industry, it was always, what can the mortuary schools do? And now being on the mortuary side of education, it's almost like, what can the industry do? So I think anyone listening to this podcast and or yourself, Tony, with, your initiative with Kates-Boylston, publications, is to really hone in to the students about the professionalism of our field. And that to me is something that the students, consistently come in, macabrely dressed and the black lipstick and the tats and the piercings, and they want to work in death care. And we've implemented a dress code at our school and they're challenging it. They're challenging it. We want to dress how we want. And it's like, well, where do you think you're going to get hired in, especially in Miami, Fort Lauderdale area? I mean, it's that conversation. It's really shedding the light from the industry, from industry professionals to our students, that it's not my opinion or your opinion. This is our field. It's a conservative, and I don't mean politically, it's just a very conservative field of helping people with dignity and respect to the families and to the decedents, and to really act the part of a funeral director.
Yeah. And one of the things that's been especially challenging, we've had this discussion, especially about dress and dress codes at some of our conferences, is there is a real disconnect. And we speak with people who, there's no better way to put it, so I'm just going to say, who have learned that you can tone things down without giving up your personal sense of style. And I think that is a good way to kind of look at it. I think it's not you can't be who you are. It's be who you are in this context.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree with that. I also would like to add that students, especially, doesn't matter, if they're a non-traditional student or fresh out of high school, they're being, looked at just like we all were, going into this profession. And a lot of them, I would almost use the word entitled, right? There's a very entitled type of attitude, for lack of a better word, meaning that they think they're going to be working 8 to 5 and they think they're going to be having the weekends off. And I tell them in my classes, it's like, as newbies, as, interns, which we have in Florida. I know different states call people different things, but the 1 year part, which is in Florida, an internship, it's like, you should be the last one to leave. You should be the first one in and the last one there, because you do have to earn your stripes in our field. And I'm not saying that you have to wash the cars and plant the tulip bulbs and, do all that. But there is a part of I'm going to use the word almost like initiation with humbleness and gratitude of being put in this position. Not that students come in expecting cream of the crop hours. They expect their vacation. And again, I'll go back to what I just said. We are under the initiative of holistic student regards to mental health and well-being, but there's also a fine line between what the expectation is and what the reality is.
I think of it as almost like a residency. When doctors get their jobs, the residency, and there have been complaints about abuse in that as well. But the idea is we're going to show you how tired you might have to be at some point. And when that happens, we want you to know that you can do it because you've already done it, right? It's getting up to speed on the potential demands before you start for the long haul. And then sometimes you have those demands and sometimes you don't have the demands, but you have to know, I guess, as bad as it can be if you're going to be successful in the industry. How's that sound?
Yeah, no, I think that resonates. And I will add to that from the standpoint that, I think during the pandemic, a lot has been brought to the forefront with regards to mental health and, people having even like a lot of our own associations offering more for funeral directors, as far as resources, which is wonderful. I will share with you what our experience is at the college is. When we were primarily Zoom, we had a new requirement for students to keep their cameras on. Okay, so they're in the Zoom box, supposed to keep your cameras on. Well, you get a few each class saying they have social anxiety, can't take put their cameras on. So then the conversation is, well, how are you going to be a funeral director? I mean, social anxiety is one thing. I mean, we all have, things that we come with, but at the same point, and it's like, whose responsibility is to educate people who have such anxiety that they have an issue with the camera on? It's like, what are you going to do in real world funeral services when maybe your arrangements are going to be videotaped or recorded or whatever that looks like? So we want to make it as real as possible. So to go back to your initial question about what the publication can do is really honing in and not just a broad, brushstroke about, it's a professional field and it's this, but no, honing on like what is the expectation of the field? Because the school can only do so much.
Right. What are your hopes for your participation, I guess, as an advisory board member?
So I want to be part of the solution, right? That is my drive. That is my initiative. I want to be part of the solution. And I don't think anyone listening to this call would disagree. And I should maybe rephrase that, Tony, because we know there's probably somebody out there that's going to disagree. But we don't want people spending their time, energy, money, going to school in whatever respective mortuary school they choose and being graduated saying, nobody told us.
Right.
The school didn't tell us, the industry didn't tell us, and now they're sitting there trying to point fingers about they can't get a job, they are not sure about so I think having this, very global awareness. People don't die between 8 and 5. It's 24/7, holidays, weekends. I mean, that's how you have to hit it hard because the students, they just kind of gloss it over. It's like, oh yeah, well, I think somebody said it was, challenging and daunting, but what does that actually mean? Like, what does that look like? So I don't want that statistic of 50% of my graduates being out of the field. And I've seen it already. I've been at the college, since 18. And there are students who graduated that are no longer in the field. So why? Like, what is so different about where we start and where we finish that the students are not grasping?
And that will bring us up to the end, unless you have something else to say. Is there something else I should have asked you? Is there something you thought you'd get to say and I didn't ask it?
You know what? I'm always available for more questions and collaboration. I'm very passionate about funeral service. It's my wheelhouse. I eat, breathe, and sleep it. And just came back from a phenomenal trip to India, looking at death customs there. So whatever I could do to support our industry, even globally, I'm in.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Tony. It's always a pleasure.
This bonus episode has been a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. If you are listening to this and have not subscribed, we would love it if you subscribed. To subscribe, all you have to do is go to the podcatcher of your choice. If you have an iPhone, you already have one. It is on the purple circle that says Apple Podcast. Just tap on that, type Funeral Service Insider. We're the only one with that name, and we will come up. Same thing if you have an Android phone, although you'll need a podcatcher. Many people use Spotify. Just go to Spotify, type Funeral Service Insider, or the same thing on Amazon Music or whichever podcatcher you use on your Android device. We're the only one with that name. Follow us or subscribe. Subscribing is free. I don't know why there's a difference between subscribing and following in between podcatchers, but that is not my business. Anyway, if you subscribe, you will never miss any of these shows when they come out. We're going to have the next few weeks, we're going to have these little bonus episodes. They're really fun. And of course, on Friday, we have the In Case You Missed It podcast, where I do a weekly summary of the news stories that I think you would do well to see. But that will do it for this week and for this bonus episode, and we will catch you next time.